With us tonight, KTLA's political consultant Matt Klink of Klink Communications. Matt, good to have you with us as always. As we wait for the introduction of the president by the House Sergeant at Arms, the president preparing to speak to Congress, to the nation, and most certainly to deliver a message to the world. And a speech, we understand, Matt, that's been reshaped dramatically over the last several days due to the events in Ukraine, events that may well redefine the arc of the Biden presidency, at the very least, reshuffle his priorities. What do you expect to hear from the president tonight?
Absolutely, Micah. This is not the speech that Joe Biden would have given 2 weeks ago. I think that what you're going to hear from him tonight is he's going to be very tough on Ukraine. He's going to congratulate NATO and Europe, but really the whole world for pulling together against Vladimir Putin's naked aggression against a sovereign country. But then he has to do a delicate pivot back toward America and our domestic political situation where he faces some serious headwinds. And I think the question tonight is, the speech will be well written, but can he deliver it well, and will it meet the moment?
Exactly, and this is exactly what he has to do, is meet the moment tonight for this historic speech. You know, Biden took a big hit last year, with COVID, the resurgence of it, with Afghanistan and foreign policy there, and then, of course, there's inflation, and that has happened again this year. You know, these are the front and center crises that he's dealing with at home and also abroad with Ukraine. You know, the tone has to be right. He has to speak to the American people in a certain way that really outlines what the plan and the State of the Union is.
Sure, exactly. And look, I think that the American public has connected the dots when they realize that every time they talk about more government spending, it means higher inflation, higher gas prices, higher cost of food. So I think that, President Biden really has to demonstrate that he is the empathizer in chief, that he feels the pain that the American consumer is going through, and that his plans are the right solution for the future. And that's a really, really difficult task tonight, because he also has to sound like the commander in chief and leader of the free world at the same time.
Matt, I thought something striking that we're learning about here just in the few moments before the president speaks. He plans to carve out roughly 1/3 of this speech to discuss the issue with Ukraine and Russia, the other 2/3 the domestic agenda. But that's a remarkable chunk of a speech to be dedicating that much of it to certainly something that the world is paying attention to and is front and center, and for Americans to understand why it matters for all of us here at home.
And exactly. He has to sell this to the American public. For the last couple of weeks, he's been talking about heightened tensions, but he has not really made the hard sell on why it's essential for America to get involved and ship supplies and military items to Ukraine without putting American troops on the ground. So he really needs to do that. And I think he'll position it by saying that this is the largest invasion in Europe since the end of World War II. It's a threat to restart a new Cold War, and that Vladimir Putin is really an unbalanced dictator who needs to be checked, and you can't coddle dictators.
There is the House Sergeant at Arms, William J. Walker, introducing the president. Matt Klink is with us. Matt, 30% of the country thinks this country is headed in the right direction. You can't turn the tide with one speech, but was the president able to meet the moment and perhaps lay a foundation going forward for better times?
Micah, he was very comfortable talking about the strong American response that really has led the world in to support Ukraine. I think he was, though, on less stable ground, though, when he tried to pivot back domestically. I think you saw it tonight. I mean, we are a divided country, and even though he didn't say the words "build back better," he's talking about a radical expansion of government programs that I don't think that Americans equate expansion of government program to more money in my pocket. And he can't balance that. He wants to lead a middle ground course, but he's still catering to the progressives in the Democratic Party. I do like, though, I love how he thanked Justice Breyer. He focused a little bit on the replacement, Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson. I think there will be some point of agreement there. She should be confirmed with a slim bipartisan majority, but nevertheless bipartisan. I think he did what he needed to do, but he was strong where he needed to be strong at the front end of the speech.
At the end of his speech, he says, "We are stronger today than we were a year ago." Of course, he wants to galvanize everybody in the chamber there for that support. But the realities here are that we have gas prices that are 40% higher than they were last year. We have inflation that we're dealing with domestically. We're now in a war, at least, the war, Ukraine, we're trying to aid Ukraine as well. There's so many aspects to this that when we say we're stronger today than we are a year ago, I feel like that's not going to hold water for many people.
Yeah, I share that's wishful thinking on the president's part. I think you just named some of the headwinds that he faces. He does have a lot to proclaim, though. Unemployment is down, and he is creating a significant number of jobs. But Americans are not stupid. They know from sitting around that kitchen room table that their dollar's not going as far, that the eggs they buy, the hamburger they buy, the vegetables they buy, it's more expensive. Gasoline costs more when you fill up your car. And if you live even in a small city, crime is indisputably up. And all of those things don't contribute to a sense of strength. But again, Joe Biden needs to project that optimism. He needs to project a message that he has a plan. And now we have to debate that plan, and we'll see what happens over the next 7 or 8 months before we have an election to see whose plan is more right.
A very difficult task for any president to deliver a State of the Union address and make it not sound like just a long list of issues and grievances and ambitions as well, but more poetry and in a sense trying to connect with the average American. Was the president successful in that regard?
At some points, absolutely. He's so heartfelt when he talks about the death that he's experienced from his son, Beau, and, the struggles that he went through as a single parent. A lot of America can relate to that. And I think that when he talked about his unity agenda, those things are very heartfelt. But when he starts talking about gun control and talking about illegal immigration, which is a massive problem that the immigration has largely ignored, I think that's where he gets into some really troubled ground. And, Joe Biden has never been known for his rhetorical excellence. He is a meat and potatoes speaker who, just gets the job done. And that's what he was able to do tonight. He read a good speech, and the laundry list is inevitable in these State of the Unions. But again, the first part of the speech on Ukraine was strong where he needed to be strong. And I think that's what people will remember more than any of the other things said in the speech.
The president comes into this speech with the second lowest rating of all time at 42% or 41%, depending on where you look, 40% on CNN, 41% on News Nation. Does this give him an upswing? Did he define his plan clearly to the American people?
Sure. I think that I would not be surprised over the next couple of weeks if you did see an uptick in Joe Biden's polling numbers, if for no other reasons than Americans will rally behind the president in times of foreign crisis. And the polling is a lagging indicator, so that the polling that's out now was conducted a couple weeks ago. I think you'll see an upswing for the president. The challenge will remain, though. People will still go back to the consumer prices, inflation, higher food prices, crime, homelessness. Those things don't magically disappear. And as the Ukraine moves off the front pages, those issues will rise back to the top. And again, this is what the 2022 election is going to be run on, the Biden agenda versus the Republicans saying that what they offer is something different and better.
Biden notably starting with the issue in Ukraine, something that was obviously received universal applause, something that unified the room and in essence set the foundation for a speech that later on dove into some issues that are much more divisive, but setting the tone obviously at the top of that speech was the president's goal. It appears he did that. He received a number of standing ovations from all corners of the gallery as he's still making his way out of the chamber at this point. But again, a united front against Russia. The president, before this speech, making it very clear at a lunch he held with news anchors and reporters at the White House, which is customary just before the State of the Union, that one of his chief concerns and primary goals tonight was to project that sense of unity, the unity with NATO. This is a united front against Russia and what they're doing, not the United States standing alone, but that we're unified. And it appears he got that message out and very clearly, Matt.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that he deserves a lot of credit for, unifying Europe as trying to herd cats because they're so different. The Brits are different from the French, who are different from the Russians. But in this case, with a crisis literally on Europe's back door, I think that Joe Biden was successful in rallying Europe to meet the moment. And I had to tell you, Micah, he has been aided substantially by the Ukrainian President Zelensky, who has, he was ridiculed by the mainstream American press for being the comedian in the office. And now they're touting him as a 21st century Winston Churchill. So, I mean, it just goes to show you the man, or the moment makes the man. President Zelensky has clearly risen to the challenge. And I got to give Joe Biden credit. His measured style in sharp contrast to what we saw for the last 4 years, I think that has paid dividends, and it has helped keep the temperature as level as possible, because we don't need the human EKG machine right now from the commander in chief when we're talking about troops in battle.
The Ukrainian President Zelensky was interviewed today and was asked about what he wanted to hear from President Biden in tonight's speech. And Zelensky said that, he wanted to hear that unity. He wanted to have the support. We heard Biden speak to the Ukrainians. We see a lot of support from, everybody in the chamber here with wearing Ukrainian colors. We even had the Ukrainian ambassador sitting in the president's box with First Lady Jill Biden. Let's talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, Oksana Markarova has been in the press quite a bit lately. She's the Ukrainian ambassador to the United States. She looked very gracious and deeply appreciative of the strong response that she's received. I mean, this is a moment for America. We like to fight for the underdog. And when a country that was under the yoke of communism, specifically the Soviet Union, for so long and declared its freedom and was able to break away, it's important that America stands up for emerging democracies. And while Ukraine is not perfect, it has some issues. Look, it is still nevertheless a democratic country. I've been to Ukraine 4 times. Their people, they want freedom. They want democracy. They love the right to vote. And it's heartwarming to see America step up and so strongly support Ukraine over just blatant Russian aggression.
And the president talking about defending every inch of NATO countries, clearly stopping short of defending Ukrainian soil itself, something that must have been nothing short of cold comfort for Ukrainians who are dealing with this crisis now on their home soil.
Micah, the Article 5 of NATO requires that an attack on one is an attack on all. And while Ukraine desperately wants to be part of NATO, they previously have not met the criteria to do so. Joe Biden is right. I mean, that's why we have 101st Airborne in Poland. We have strengthened our troop commitment to NATO's eastern countries. but we will not put American troops on the ground. And look, we do not want to be face to face with two great powers, both with nuclear weapons. We don't want to fight Russia, and Russia does not want to fight us.
Of course, the midterm elections coming up. Do we see that he set a course for his party as we move into this midterm elections?
Sure. Typically the party in power, meaning in this case the Democrats, they lose an average of 26 House seats. Right now, if that were to happen, that would translate to a 21-seat Republican advantage next year in 2023 in the House of Representatives. It is almost a certainty that the Republicans will take the House of Representatives. The question is do they have enough oomph to pull through and pick up 2 Senate seats to switch that majority? If that happens, the Biden presidency for the remaining 2 years of his first term looks significantly different. But as my Democratic friends in Washington say, that's why we have elections, is to determine who wins and loses. And there's a lot of space between now and the first Tuesday in November, and a lot can change. Right now, it looks really good if you're a Republican and not so good if you're a Democrat. But again, with Russia attacking Ukraine, if that spreads, God forbid, or if the economy recovers and consumer prices drop, those losses suddenly shrink, and before you know it, we have a really competitive election. So it's what political consultants like me live for, is the next 7 months.
So it would appear the president's domestic agenda as of tonight, stalled efforts to pass that far-reaching social spending legislation that he talked about at length tonight, needs momentum, doesn't have it, and has very little runway.
He faces a challenge, Micah, in that he's pulled between the moderates in the party and the progressives in the party. And to pass their agenda, they have to use something called reconciliation, which is a 50 vote item. But again, with Kristen Sinema from Arizona and Joe Manchin from West Virginia, both of whom have said that they don't agree with major chunks of that Build Back Better stack of legislation, Joe Biden would be wise to scale back and to put forth something that he knows can pass. But he runs into the conflict between the moderates, who know they're in jeopardy for the next election, versus the progressives, who have safe seats and want to grab for the brass ring, which is the total progressive agenda, more government spending, more government regulation, et cetera. So the Democratic Party really needs to resolve it internally, and they're not going to get any Republican votes for any of that.
I want to focus on one of the sound bites here from the speech. When the president announced something about test to treat, which I think was, profound, that you could go into a pharmacy, test, and then be treated with a pill. Let's take a listen to what the president said during his State of the Union speech about this.
Now we're launching the Test to Treat initiative, so people can get tested at a pharmacy, and if they prove positive, receive the antiviral pills on the spot at no cost. If you're immunocompromised or have some other vulnerability, we have treatments and free high-quality masks. We're leaving no one behind or ignoring anyone's needs as we move forward. On testing,
this, ordering however many pills he said, I think 1 million pills, is showing progress to everyone, that it's a way of him touting that his administration has conquered the pandemic. And you see that visually at the House chamber there, in the gallery, where most of the people are not masked. And that mandate lifted, ironically, today on the night of his speech in Washington, D.C.
And Cher, that's going to make a huge difference. The Biden administration, self-admitted, was largely caught unprepared for Omicron. And what you didn't hear Joe Biden say, though, tonight was that COVID is on the run. He was much more circumspect. He was much more measured. And I think that Joe Biden is smart enough to know, and his people are certainly telling him, that the more America gets back to normal, no masks. No masks indoors. School children not wearing masks. Perish the thought on that. Those things of life getting back to normal and learning how to live and manage what will be an endemic as opposed to a pandemic, that will probably boost consumer sentiment as well, because it's been tough. I mean, it's been brutal on children. It's been horrible on small businesses. And the government, they're not equipped to handle something this big and move quickly. And I think that as time progresses, people will begin to relax and feel better. And then they'll realize that Joe Biden has done some good things for the economy.
The president addressing the very clear divide in this country that has only grown, born out of frustration and disagreements over the pandemic and the COVID response from the United States government. And the president talked about a moment to reset, emerging from the pandemic and trying to bring sides together. Let's listen.
Let's use this moment to reset. So stop looking at COVID as a partisan dividing line. See it for what it is, a god-awful disease. Let's stop seeing each other as enemies and start seeing each other for who we are, fellow Americans. Look.
To hear it from the President of the United States is very, very important, something we hear in rooms and galleries across the country and, at the water cooler. But to hear it from the President tonight is important, I think.
Michael, let's hope that messaging sticks. And look, the pandemic has been hard on everyone. Whether you're masked or unmasked, whether you're vaccinated or you're not vaccinated, specifically looking at police officers and firefighters and nurses and doctors that are being dismissed at a time when we desperately need them. I do think we've got to find a way to make it so that everyone is comfortable and that as many people as possible are safe, and that vaccines, and I give the president credit. I give the last president credit for starting it, and I give the current president credit for continuing it and expanding it, making vaccines, safe, plentiful, and free, I think is more of an encouragement to get as many people vaccinated as possible, because that is the path to ultimately getting back to living with this and making life as normal as possible.
Iowa Governor Kim Reynolds giving the GOP response, gaining national attention for her pushback on the federal government response to the pandemic. Matt Klink, the governor, going right at the Biden administration and Democrats on two very real issues of concern on Main Street: gas prices and inflation.
Micah, what I was going to say before she so rudely interrupted me is what you saw there was really the anti-Joe Biden approach. Governor Kim Reynolds, the first female governor in Iowa, she took a dramatically different approach from President Biden and the federal government. She rejected $95 million in federal funding for COVID testing in schools. She didn't have mask mandates. And Iowa thrived. She's cut taxes, both personal and corporate. In fact, what she talked about, that 3.9% tax, it's actually a flat tax, meaning there is no progressive tax in Iowa. Look, this was a strong performance. Typically the response speech, there have been a lot of failed attempts. Just think of Bobby Jindal and Marco Rubio as two that did not do so well. She did really a strong job tonight, and it could be an audition for a spot on the Republican ticket in 2024. Yeah,
certainly. This spot is often reserved for a politics rising star. And so this is her biggest stage yet, and was calm and was able to deliver what she called an alternative, conservative leadership and what that looks like, and talking about leading, that perhaps Biden was a little too little too late and reacting rather than driving a leadership through the world. Your thoughts on that?
Sure. It's so difficult for the president of the United States to talk about kitchen table issues in terms that resonate with people, because Joe Biden in this case, he doesn't get around regular people that often. He is surrounded in a bubble. He doesn't really drive anywhere. He flies in a helicopter or a private or Air Force One, and governors and city council members and state legislators, they are literally pressing the flesh on a daily basis. And what I think Kim Reynolds did tonight, she talked about the pain that real people are feeling sitting around their kitchen table. And that's a challenge that presidents always have. And it's an advantage of being out of power. I'm sure it's an advantage that the Republicans would greatly give up if they could hold the White House. But she did an effective job of creating an alternative vision of how America could work better. And what you saw is really the battlegrounds of the 2022 campaign. The model that Glenn Youngkin followed in Virginia when he beat Terry McAuliffe is the model that Kim Reynolds talked about tonight. And that's what Republicans see as their path to victory in 2022.
Saying with bold letters, no to bigger government, a familiar rallying cry.
Absolutely. And that's a sharp contrast, Micah, to what Build Back Better is a radical, and I don't mean just a big, it is a radical expansion of the government social safety net, which is why it was not supported by a majority of Democrats. And that's the problem that Joe Biden faces, is he's pushing this massive expansion of government, trying to be a transition or a transformational leader. He didn't run as a transformational leader. He ran as someone who was going to restore America to normalcy after 4 years of Donald Trump. But he's trying to govern like LBJ or FDR without FDR's or LBJ's congressional majorities. And the public sees right through it. And frankly, his own party doesn't agree with it.
We want to go back really quick to Matt Klink. A quick wrap of what we heard tonight in 15 seconds.
I think lots of things that both sides can grab onto. The Biden administration will be happy with his performance tonight. They can go out and press the issue of unanimity on Ukraine, and they will appeal to the base with their progressive policies. And the Republicans will be excited about the response by Iowa Governor Kim Reynolds.
Longtime political analyst for KTLA, Matt Klink with Klink Communications. Matt, thanks for being with us.